being completely yourself again? And at what point did you make that switch to focus on the season and less rehab?
Yeah, I try to do it ASAP. Rehab is horrible, right? And so I think for me, I feel like I got cleared 10 different times. I think people were just being extra sure. And so I fully got cleared in February. And so I've been going, and I feel good. It's nice to be back. You know, it's you play pickup and you do all this, but then once you get out here and you have to be intentional, you have to kind of get used to that speed again. But I feel great. I feel like, our surgeon here with the team doc did a great job, and I'm feeling like myself.
6 excruciating months. Half a year of absolute, agonizing, deafening silence. If you want to understand the terrifying reality of what is about to happen in the Women's National Basketball Association this season, you cannot start on the glittering hardwood under the bright arena lights. You have to start in the shadows. You have to start in the isolated, lonely, hyper-sterile environment of a medical rehabilitation facility. That is where Sophie Cunningham was trapped, while the rest of the basketball world moved on without her. An MCL tear is not a minor inconvenience. It is not a sprained ankle where you tape it up, swallow some painkillers, and jog it off by the weekend. It is a catastrophic, foundation-shaking trauma to the human body. For 6 months, Sophie was entirely cut off from the roaring crowds, the flash of the media cameras, and the electric, chaotic energy of the Indiana Fever locker room. She was locked in a grueling war against her own anatomy, grinding through brutal plyometric circuits, exhausting mobility drills, and solitary weight sessions while her teammates were outliving the life she was desperately trying to claw her way back to. When you are isolated like that, the mind starts to play vicious tricks on you. The psychological toll of an injury is infinitely worse than the physical pain. Sophie was officially cleared by her top-tier surgical team, but as any elite athlete will tell you, getting a piece of paper with a doctor's signature is absolutely meaningless until you test the joint in the fire of live combat. There is a massive, terrifying canyon between the moment a ligament is technically healed on a magnetic resonance imaging scan and the exact moment an elite basketball player can explosively cut off a hard screen at maximum velocity without their brain screaming in sheer panic. That mental block is the ultimate enemy. Sophie confessed to the media, with a brutal level of honesty that you rarely see in professional sports, that she felt like she had been cleared 10 different times. The Indiana Fever medical staff was acting with an abundance of extreme caution. They were borderline paranoid, flat out refusing to give her the ultimate green light for full contact, unrestricted action until the absolute end of February. They had all the biometric data. They had the strength measurements. They had the numbers. But until you step onto the floor and look your opponent in the eye, until you prove that your body won't spectacularly betray you when a 200-pound forward crashes into your legs at full speed, it is all just a medical theory. So, when Sophie Cunningham finally pushed open the heavy double doors of the Indiana Fever practice facility for the very first time in half a year, the air in the room was heavy. The gym was dead quiet. She stepped onto the pristine hardwood with a surgically repaired knee and 2 massive, terrifying questions hanging violently over her head like a guillotine. Number 1, would her body actually hold up to the merciless, bone-jarring impact of professional basketball? And number 2, what kind of shattered, drama-filled, unrecognizable roster was she walking back into? The offseason had been an absolute whirlwind of chaos, blockbuster negotiations, and toxic media rumors. But before she could even fully lace up her shoes, before she could even take a deep breath and process the moment, she heard it. The sound, the rhythm, the unmistakable, terrifying cadence of absolute perfection. Swish, swish, swish. 30 consecutive times, no rim, no backboard, just the pure, crisp sound of the net snapping back into place. Sophie froze in her tracks. She looked down the court, and standing right there at the arc, entirely in her own universe, was Caitlin Clark. But this wasn't the exact same Caitlin Clark that the league had violently battered and bruised during her rookie campaign. This was a leaner, faster, terrifyingly precise evolution. She wasn't just casually shooting around to get her muscles warm. She was running at full, game speed intensity. She was sprinting off invisible screens, violently planting her feet, catching passes on the dead run, and burying 30 back-to-back net-scorching three-pointers from deep beyond the arc without a single solitary miss. You cannot fake perfect shooting mechanics when your lungs are screaming for oxygen and your legs are burning with lactic acid. That level of consecutive robotic perfection means the muscle memory is completely locked in. It means the off-season was spent in absolute obsession. When reporters finally cornered Sophie Cunningham to ask what she witnessed that morning, to get her thoughts on her superstar teammate's return, she did not offer a polite, media-trained, perfectly polished public relations soundbite. She didn't give them a sterile quote designed for a press release. She looked them dead in the eye and delivered a chilling warning that sent an immediate shockwave through the entire league. She stated that Clark isn't just back, she is in absolute, cold-blooded MVP form. And the way she said it, the absolute lack of hesitation in her voice, made it crystal clear that this wasn't hype for the reality television cameras. She was reporting a terrifying fact the exact same way you would report a hurricane forming on the horizon. But the shooting wasn't even the most suspenseful part of what Sophie witnessed. The entire gym had to completely stop their own workouts just to watch Caitlin's passing. Clark has always possessed a generational court vision, an uncanny ability to see the geometry of the floor in a way that mere mortals simply cannot comprehend. But something has drastically leveled up during the winter. Sophie vividly detailed specific mind-bending sequences in camp where Clark was throwing utterly impossible, pinpoint no-look passes that completely scrambled the brains of veteran defenders. The passes weren't reckless or wild, they were perfectly placed lasers. The terrifying problem for the defense was that Clark was seeing passing angles a full 2 seconds before those angles actually existed in physical reality. She was throwing the basketball to completely empty space, knowing with mathematical certainty exactly where her teammate would be 3 steps later. The veteran players were quite literally standing completely still, their brains desperately trying to process the impossible physics of what had just happened. And by the time they realized the play was completely dead, the ball was already resting safely in the bottom of the basket, while Sophie was quietly observing this absolute masterpiece of basketball evolution on the practice court. A completely different, highly venomous war was exploding across the internet. A deeply toxic, entirely manufactured narrative was spreading like wildfire in the dark corners of the WNBA offseason. Desperate media accounts, completely starved for content and hungry for cheap clicks, had taken a completely harmless, out-of-context podcast comment from Sophie and viciously twisted it into a massive, fabricated locker room betrayal. The fake story was absolutely everywhere on social media. Sophie Cunningham was furious. The Indiana Fever front office was entirely disrespecting her. She absolutely hated the locker room chemistry. She was violently mad about her salary, and she was actively demanding to be let go from the franchise. It was a terrifying masterclass in modern digital manipulation, designed specifically to generate outrage, and people were commenting on her posts, dissecting her body language in old videos, and creating a drama that simply did not exist in reality. Sophie Cunningham didn't wait for a corporate PR team to step in. She didn't wait for her agent to draft a sterile, cowardly apology letter. She didn't hide from the noise. She logged directly onto the most toxic platform on earth, Twitter, and she took an absolute, unapologetic flamethrower to the rumors. Her response was brutal, instantaneous, and devastatingly clear. She explicitly stated to the entire world that she wasn't mad about the money in the slightest. She openly admitted that she had highly lucrative, multi-year maximum dollar offers sitting right there on the table from rival WNBA franchises. Other general managers were literally begging her to jump ship, offering her the bag to leave Indiana behind. But she refused them all. Every single one of them. Why? Because the entire fake controversy missed the absolute fundamental truth of who she is as a person. She wanted to stay in Indiana so badly, she loved her teammates so deeply, that she willingly took a 1-year, highly team-friendly deal just to keep the core roster completely intact. That wasn't a PR stunt. That wasn't damage control. That was the raw, unadulterated irritation of a fiercely loyal player watching outsiders try to burn down her home. And that specific, uncompromising loyalty is exactly why the rest of the league should be absolutely terrified right now. Because every generational, league-altering talent in the entire history of sports needs a bodyguard. You cannot survive greatness without protection. Michael Jordan had Charles Oakley to break ribs when teams got too physical. Wayne Gretzky had Marty McSorley on the ice to ensure nobody touched the Great One. Caitlin Clark has Sophie Cunningham, The WNBA is a deeply physical, unforgiving, and brutal league. Let's rewind the tape to the violently charged June 2025 matchup against the brutally aggressive Connecticut Sun. In a sequence that still boils the absolute blood of Fever fans everywhere, J.C. Sheldon deliberately, maliciously, poked Caitlin Clark directly in her. Marina Mabrey delivered a massive, unprovoked, cheap shot shove that sent the rookie stumbling. These were calculated physical provocations designed entirely to bully, rattle, and destroy the spirit of the young superstar. The referees hesitated. The league watched to see what would happen next. But Sophie Cunningham did not wait for permission. She didn't look at the bench for instructions. Her response was instantaneous, explosive, and completely terrifying. She hunted Sheldon down on a fast break layup attempt and violently, unapologetically yanked her straight out of the air, sending her crashing hard onto the unforgiving hardwood. Sophie took the flagrant 2 ejection without blinking. She walked straight off the court, down the tunnel, and didn't show a single, solitary ounce of regret. The message was sent, signed in blood, and delivered with extreme precision. Allen is universally respected as one of the toughest, most intimidating forces on the planet, a player who actively strikes fear into the hearts of opponents. But Sophie? She stepped right up into the blast radius, grabbed her leg after a controversial foul, and stared the Reaper dead in the face. The referees were desperately sprinting to separate them, while the Mercury players wouldn't even dare step into the fray. What the rest of the league consistently fails to realize, and what makes this entire situation so incredibly suspenseful, is that Sophie's brand of on-court violence is entirely calculated. It is not reckless anger. It is a deeply ingrained martial arts discipline. Most people treat this as a fun little biographical footnote, but it is the absolute key to her entire psychological profile. Sophie Cunningham earned a black belt in Taekwondo at 6 years old. We are talking about decades of elite combat sports training permanently hardwired into her central nervous system. She has been meticulously conditioned her entire life to read physical confrontation. The unwritten rules of the hardwood strictly protects her superstar point guard and then seamlessly drops back into her deadly catch-and-shoot role without missing a single, completely ignoring. She knew that in the year 2027, the absolute financial bill comes due for this franchise. Both Caitlin Clark and the unstoppable interior force that is Aaliyah Boston, who, by the way, just signed the single largest contract extension in WNBA history, will be eligible for epic-defining, franchise-altering, absolute maximum super extensions. If Amber overpriced, shiny new free agent this offseason, she would have completely destroyed the team's financial future. She would have mathematically forced the franchise to entirely dismantle this dynasty before it even truly began. Instead, she mathematically engineered the perfect airtight offseason master plan. She kept Sophie on a brilliant team-friendly deal. She secured the incredibly lethal he simply refused to break. Professional athletes do not sacrifice guaranteed millions of dollars for a toxic workplace. They don't take one-year deals if they don't absolutely believe, down to their bones, that a championship ring is inevitable. And then, Cox went out and brought in absolute physical monsters. If you want a street fight in 2026, the Fever have an entire, incredibly deep roster ready to oblige. The league had an entire, lengthy offseason to study the tape. They had months to sit in dark film rooms, analyze the defensive rotations, figure out the spacing, and pray they could build a scheme to slow down Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. But while everyone else was desperately trying to solve the puzzle of 2025, the Fever quietly, ruthlessly evolved into an absolute nightmare. They are significantly bigger. They are noticeably meaner. They are infinitely more dangerous. Sophie Cunningham is completely healthy. She is angry at the media disrespect, and she is fully prepared to go to